first thing is to acknowledge where we have been as far as larger community leaders. And I think we saw most of this in 2019 when we first launched our drawdown projects. We had presentations that we invited the whole community to and had 75 to 100 people show up for the drawdown workshop, to hear Dr. Thomas Lovejoy, who has since passed. I mean, what a treat that was for us. Some of the scientists from our own community. So in that way, we've had an impact. I always look to Barbara Bacon is always out in the community, and her repair cafes have not only brought in people from around our community, but they inspired the Alexandria Library System to start their own repair cafe. And Barbara's always looking for connections out at other churches and community centers and in River Towers. So we're having an impact in that way. And the other way that we've had an impact beyond our community is, particularly before COVID, when people were mingling about, we've had a fair number, and I can think of at least one person that started to interact with our climate action team because their church didn't have anything. They couldn't talk about these things at their church. And so, being a beacon even for individuals have all been things we've been really successful at. I will tell you though, every year in January, when we used to have our annual retreats, this was their one sticky question: how we can have a bigger impact in the community, how we can connect with other churches, how we can do more advocacy. And we spent way more than 15 minutes talking about it. And I would say it's still one of our weaker points. We're not that we're not doing good things, but we're not having the impact that we could hope that we would have. So I think this is a very important conversation, and I hope that it is continued either at CAT meetings or for another community-wide discussion. The things that I think we can accomplish today, and I would like to really be a catalyst for. So let's go about 4 slides up from here. This is what John wanted me to talk about, what I'm going to talk about. So this is when we do have the discussion. Oh my gosh, I cannot sit down and talk. I was going to practice it. So when we do have the discussion, I think it's important to go back to what our vision and goals are. And I feel like in this time where we're so frantic to make any kind of change or solution, that we might have lost sight of some more powerful goals. And this is just a possible framework. This is how I think about these things. We all are interested in how to solve the problem quickly, but environmental justice, the impacts on nature, and does it meet resilience? These are all things that go together. And as you recall, when the Green New Deal came out, this was the conversation. It's not just about energy efficiency or reducing carbon emissions. It's about solutions that help us build a better society that's not going to be extractive and exploitive. So we're not going to have these problems with our next energy source and our next way of doing business. Next. So we want that intersection. Green New Deal. Next. So an example, this year's Climate Week, which was about a month ago in New York, is really focused on the fight against fossil fuels. And these evil fossil fuel companies, they've got to come around, right? Now, it's true, they're evil. But we know from Project Drawdown that addressing climate change has 80 different solutions, 9 different ways that you can approach it, and this is only one of them. So the flip side, electrify everything. How long will it take in doing that to actually bring down carbon, right? So will that meet social justice? Will it protect nature? Will it have an effect on resilience? And this is a paradigm that, a rubric that you could use for almost any solution that you're thinking about. So next, so what are some other ways that we could think about it? So I have 3 different examples. I call them bolder and better. Somebody once said, maybe it was Buckminster Fuller, the way to solve a problem is to come up with a bigger problem, right? And this is kind of the kind of thinking that I'm applying here. It may not work for the church, it's the way I think about things. So we're talking about electrification. What about passive houses, where people can stay warm or cool without inputs, whether the electric or whatever they are? And that's something that Dave has kind of talked about, right? That part of that is insulation. Why don't we have that? And this is where we get to community action and an agency, because Virginia is working with 2009 building codes. And right now, the international standards are at 2021. What does that mean? That we are having not enough insulation, not enough tightness of an envelope in our houses, because they're being built just to code. And in this, I just read Ivy Main, you've got to follow Ivy Main, who writes about these issues for Virginia, that we've gone backwards from 2009 to 2006 requirements on some of these issues. Why is that? Because the developers lobby in Virginia makes the code. What can we do about it? We have to have agency, we have to be engaged politically at the state level. Next. Solution number 2, rooftop and pavement solar. Now we just heard there's a huge cost difference between that and solar fields and forests, but let me tell you, it's going to be a problem. We cannot cut down our forests, we cannot take over our farmland in order to go solar, because we need those for forests, for ecosystem services. They're keeping us cool, they regulate the rain and give us air, and you know, all the systems services. Farmland, I'm going to say this should be obvious, but we're going to need food. And as climate change makes farms over here not have a yield, we're going to need the farms over here. We really cannot afford to give up more farmland. So why is this happening? For a good reason, right? We were very eager to support solar. So what did we do? Virginia did this on a state level. It happens in every state. We said, well, let's not do the environmental review for solar projects, because we don't want anything to slow us down. Well, so this is what we're getting. I'm working right now at, and I have an existential problem with this. BAU is business as usual. And I feel like what we're doing is creating the same structure around energy that we had for gas and coal, but with solar and wind. It's being run by the big utility companies. They're going to set the rates. They're going to come through your land. They're going to run transmission lines across reservations. They're going to put substations in environmental justice neighborhoods. That's not the future I want to be putting my energy into. So that's just me. But we have a choice, right? Doesn't mean we don't do solar, but we have to be vigilant at how it's being done and who's making the decisions. And there's a little study, my organization is having a talk November 9th with someone from Mass Audubon, who they have done a study to show how we can meet our solar needs without disrupting these natural areas and how much more it would cost. So you should come to that. I will send you an email. Next example, and it's the last one, 3 out of 3, zoning and planning, right? So we live in the suburbs. A lot of America's big and spread out, and that's why we have twice the carbon footprint of Europe, right? And so what are things we can do about that? We know we have zoning that has created this issue, and I don't think we're spending enough time pushing back against that. I have a vision of golf cart lanes connecting River Towers to the Bellevue Shopping Center, right? And you know, maybe 10 years ago you'd have thought, well, that's just crazy. And now I know there's resort towns, there's retired communities, they're all designed along this. We have examples of how it works, right? Bike lanes. I just got back from a visit to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and their bike lanes are green, and they are inside the parking of the cars so that the bicyclists are safe, and there are people all over. You would think you were in Amsterdam. I mean, bikes and people everywhere. Now, you know, they've got a lot of colleges or young people, you know, so, but even in, you know, in bad weather. Mixed use redevelopment. I have a vision of apartments on top of the Walmart down here on South Richmond Highway, and that parking lot becoming a green space, and a rooftop garden on top of that, and people being able to walk around there. How much would that cost? I don't know, but they're tearing up all of Route 1 to put in a bus lane in the middle of the road, right? That is going to make it harder for people to have walkability in that neighborhood. Why are they doing that? Because it took them 20 years to get this plan from planning to implementation, and we're doing a solution that would have worked then and is not going to work for the future. How do I know that? I want to give a shout out to Mary Payton, who is not here, but she keeps us connected as a church to the Route 1 corridor community and to what's going on in our neighborhood. And we need to give her more support. She does that like almost by herself. But I went to some of those meetings and I asked somebody, now not everybody there is as well informed as we are. They're just like, you know, what are you going to do? But I happened to be at a table of people like me, and we asked about, well, what about some green space? What about, you know, some of these options, making it more walkable? Raise my hand, a little person comes over, you know, who's there from the contractor who's doing it for the county, and she says, well, you know, it just depends on what the developer wants to do. Like, yeah, I knew that, but I didn't think she would tell me to my face, right? And again, a question of why is this? You know, it seems like we have no agency. How does our voice get heard? There was a study that came out, you know, time gets a little confused here, 2 or 3 years ago, where they measured community activism, lobbyist views, and the actual change in legislation. Our voice did not matter in that study. There's too much money in politics, right? It's a problem. So I give those examples, I give them quickly. I would love to have conversations about each one of them, but we don't get to. But just to stretch your mind as to like, are we thinking big enough? Are these things crazy? Or are they possible if we try to do them? John wants to ask me a question.
Well, no, I really wanted to ask Richard. I'd like for you to go back to the rubric where you had those 4 things. And I want to ask Richard to think about how his Lawton plant might fit within that rubric.
I'm sorry, how am I?
Well, she's going to show you. See those 4 things: speed, nature, justice, resilience. That's a sort of a template to think about and how this might relate to Lawton. So is it something that could happen fast? What's the impact on nature if we get it done? Justice, you'll have to explain that back.
Were you ready to make a pitch?
Okay. I'm going to pass on this one because I'm not.
Yeah, you know, but when you have a meeting and you decide to get together and talk about that for an hour, like those are some things you consider, I would think.
Okay. Jack hasn't spoken, so the microphone was close by.
Hey, Hayden.
Oh, you're a standard too.
Just an historical note. My parents and a lot of the people in Holland Hills and Talksmont are really involved in all this. Some of them are founders of the church. And what I understood, if you look at the whole Washington area, the old city of Washington was really well planned out for big parks and green space and everything. None of the suburbs are anywhere near as good, because, with some exceptions, because they built out, there was farms. It just didn't look like green space was in a shortage when they were first building, you know, all the suburbs. But what I understood was that the old Fairfax County Democratic Board, and this is going back, this is when it was all Democrats, segregationist Democrats and liberal Democrats, that they were able to make the developers, basically, in order to give sewer and water permits, that they extorted from the developers. You have to give this much space for a school, this much space for a park, you have to do this, you have to do that. And when the Republicans took over the Fairfax County board, so Jack Harity, the guys came in, they were really pro-developer, and all of a sudden they blew all that away. And I think the developers and the banks, I think, went to the Virginia Supreme Court and knocked out the county's ability to do that. And the next day, the county was built and built out, and none of the counties now have the power that those old counties did to force the developers to give a certain amount of land for parks or schools or whatever. I don't know if that's outdated, but that was my understanding.
There is a rule, Barbara, do you remember the name of it? There is a rule that limits what the county can do according to what, the Dillon rule, yeah.
I don't have any solutions, but I do know, I have relatives that live in Minneapolis, and they live over a supermarket in magnificent condo. And the whole block is condos with things like supermarkets and CVS's and things like that, and they love it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
They tell us that Americans are in love with cars. We have no choice. We can't get anywhere without a car. When people live in a walkable community, they do like it. I do have a few solutions that I can whip through in about a few minutes, about a few things to focus on if you want me to go there.
I have one quick other thing.
Yes,
The
go
whole area around the Safeway in Bellevue is, if everyone had a golf cart, it could all be no vehicles.
Yeah,
You park outside, you take your golf cart.
see, we need to be creative like that, right? And when you walk through that parking lot, the thing you notice is there's no place for pedestrians. Even when you're getting from your car in the back to the front, right? It's not designed for any place for pedestrians.
Okay, we better have one last intervention from Barbara. Barbara, are you ready to go?
Oh, this is Chris's, right?
Yeah, Chris Rosenthal couldn't be here today, and she sends apologies. She's traveling. But she did send me some ideas that she had. And with your permission, I'll go ahead and read them. I was going to try to cut them down, but I'll try to go fast. She says, while personal changes matter, of course, systemic changes are essential to address climate change. How do we make that happen? By working with other interested groups and educating our networks. Public awareness and political pressure have the power to make government do what we need to have done. Our local governments now all have energy waste reduction plans in place. Even Prince William County is the most recent locality to put plans in place. Fairfax County's Office of Environmental, I never get this right, is Office of Environment, let's go with that, is struggling to get communities involved. So how can we help? We've already done great stuff, much of it via fax, Faith Alliance, but we can do more. In our Mount Vernon area, a number of congregations are making changes. Heritage Presbyterian is tending to several acres of grounds, has exchanged light bulbs for LEDs, and is planning to add solar panels. Aldersgate Methodist is planting more trees and native plant gardens. Rising Hope is increasing its energy efficiency with new HVAC and insulation. Could we, at MVUC, reach out and set up a series of conversations among these green teams about what works, what's going on, what the ongoing needs are? People in those congregations may be interested in resiliency planning as well. She asks if MVUC could make short videos about our composting, heat pumps, plant-based diet efforts to share. And Chris would also like to see more community-wide networks developing as county and Alexandria efforts expand. The elected people will need to know that they're supported by the voters. We can show that we have their backs. I know a lot of this networking is already going on, and just within the last couple of days, David has made contact with the energy folks at FACS.
Through you, so thank you, Barbara.
Well, that's the way it happens. And so we are reaching out, and I think we should continue, and apparently Chris does too. Thank you.
Wonderful. I feel like if I could take you for 5 more minutes, I'd like to go to the last 3 slides.
Yeah, can I just do a check? Is everyone okay to see the last? Yep, lots of nods.
Thank you. Because there are, okay, so where can we focus, right? And you've heard me talk a lot about agency. Interestingly, Eleanor talked this morning about will to power. And it's kind of the same thing. Are we afraid to flex our muscle? What does it take to have agency? I have 3 categories broadly: getting money out of politics. You might have heard me in 2019 talking about HR 1 as the most important climate legislation. It wasn't climate legislation, it was cleaning up the political and the voting system. It was dropped. We cannot let go of that, because as long as the people with money have more power than the people, and people have been in favor of climate action from the beginning, Republicans and Democrats. Our voice has just been drowned out by the money. Banding together in our communities, you may have heard what's becoming a famous quote from Bill McKibben. Somebody asked him in the audience, what can I do as an individual to fight climate change? He said, stop being an individual. It's hard for some of us people who are non-joiners, but it is time to step out of your comfort zone and see that your voice really does matter when you get together with other people. In Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, you can't do better than the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. They have created an incredibly effective local advocacy program. But here I'm going to take you to the third column. We need to be a new kind of warrior. And forgive me for the war metaphor. We just sung, I ain't gonna do war no more. But I'm talking about an administrative warrior. We need to learn to be strong for what we believe in. And that's what I mean by a warrior. And fortunately, we're not being called on to learn to throw Molotov cocktails and protect our families from bombing. We're being called on to be able to sit in meetings and show up and follow the bureaucracy and make our voice heard. It is just as important. That is our battleground right now. And FACTS has a way to train anybody with time to do that. And it's not scary, and it's incredibly effective. Because like Chris said through Barbara, these guys can, if they only hear it from a handful of people and everybody else is going to be going, what are you doing? It's not going to happen. And these processes are open to us. I advise you to follow Ivy Main. Just look her up and follow what she talks about energy and state level legislation. And it's not boring the way she writes about it.
Name again?
Ivy Main. Yeah, she has a blog. The League of Conservation Voters, Sierra Club Audubon, the National UU, these are all groups that we can look to find out where group action is happening. Last slide. Oh, this is the second to last. This is my organization, Biodiversity for a Livable Climate. The kinds of things we talk about are rebuilding the biosphere. And you see on one column, everything from healthy soils, mini forests, food forests, contouring for water, minimizing heat island. These could all be done at the church, and we can support each other by doing them with a sister church or helping other schools and people do that. And in the center column there, considering nature-based solutions. And an example in our community is the flooding from the Potomac. Do you want the Army Corps of Engineers to build a seawall, or can we make a wetlands there that will not only hold the water, but also improve the biosphere and all those ecosystem services? Check us out. Last slide, I promise. My closing thoughts are, remember, we can't do it all. I am looking exactly at Barbara Bacon right here. If all of us go to a different county meeting, Barbara doesn't have to go to all of them herself, right? So when you think about whether you're going to volunteer, think about a meeting that Barbara doesn't have to go to. Follow your passion. This has always been how CAT has been organized, that there are things that speak to you, and that's where you should put your energy, right? And if it's the waste plant or whatever it is, it'll make a difference, and that'll keep you going. Act from love, even as a warrior, our love for the planet, our love for the community, our love from each other. And the main thing we can do to build a new world and a different kind of society moving forward is to pay attention to our connections to each other and to nature, and to prioritize that. So hopefully this helps guide whatever the next conversations are about how to be more active in the community.
Thank you very much, Beck.